Hi, this is Andrew again. This is the second video in the series on Amalek and the Amalekites. With Saul's rejection, the mantle of leadership passes to David, the shepherd from Bethlehem, better than Saul. David's relationship with Amalek is more complex and personal. He is not the agent of a national annihilation in the same way Saul was commanded to be, but he becomes a direct victim of Amalekite cruelty and the instrument of their justice on a smaller, more immediate scale. The first connection is indirect but sinister. While David is fleeing from the paranoid King Saul, he seeks refuge with Ahimelech, the priest at Nob. He lies, claiming he is on a secret mission for the king, and asks for provisions and a weapon. Ahimelech, believing in David, gives him the consecrated bread and the sword of Goliath. This act of compassion is witnessed by Doeg the Edomite, Saul's chief herdsman. Doeg the Edomite, Saul's chief herdsman, a man whose name itself carries the weight of his heritage. As a descendant of Esau, Doeg represents the broader Edomite rivalry with Israel, but his actions in this narrative reveal a spirit that is pure Amalek. He reports the interaction to Saul, twisting the priest's innocent aid into a conspiracy. Enraged, Saul commands his guards to kill the priests of Nob. When they refuse, violating their oath to the king, Saul turns to Doeg. Doeg, without hesitation, falls upon the priests of the Lord. He kills 85 men who wore the linen ephod. He then turns his sword upon the city of Nob, both men and women, children and oxen, and asses and sheep with the edge of the sword. 1 Samuel 22, verse 19. The language is deliberate and horrifying. It mirrors the command given to Saul against Amalek. Doeg, the Edomite, carries out the very slaughter that the Israelite king was supposed to inflict upon the Amalekites, but he does it against God's own servants. In this moment, Doeg acts as an agent of Amalek, demonstrating the same predatory, God-defying spirit. He attacks the weak and defenseless, the priests and their families, out of malice and a desire to curry favor with the king. He is the personification of Amalek's sin, a wolf in shepherd's clothing, proving that the Amalekite spirit was not confined to a single bloodline, but could infect anyone who chose to prey on the righteous. David's own direct, life-altering encounter with the Amalekites occurs during one of the lowest points of his life. While he and his men are living as mercenaries in Ziklag under the Philistine king Achish, they are excused from the battle against Israel, much to their relief. They return to Ziklag, only to find it smoldering and empty. The Amalekites had raided the Negev and Ziklag, burning the city to the ground and taking captive all the women and children, including David's own 2 wives, Ahinoam and Abigail. The grief of David and his men is immense. The Bible records they wept until they had no more power to weep. David's own men, bitter in their souls, turn on him, speaking of stoning him. It is a moment of utter desolation. But David, in a defining display of his character, strengthened himself in the Lord his God. 1 Samuel 30, verse 6. He inquires of the Lord, asking, "Shall I pursue after this troop? Should I overtake them?" God answers, "Pursue, for thou shalt surely overtake them, and shalt without fail recover all." David sets out with his 600 men. They reach Brook Besor, where 200 of them, too exhausted to continue, are left behind with the baggage. David presses on with 400 men. They find an Egyptian slave in the field, left for dead by his Amalekite masters. David gives him food and water, reviving him. The Egyptian, in exchange for his life, agrees to lead David to the Amalekite raiders. He leads them to a vast, sprawling encampment where the Amalekites were spread abroad upon all the earth, eating and drinking and dancing because of all the great spoil that they had taken out of the land of the Philistines and out of the land of Judah. They were celebrating their victory, complacent and secure. David attacks them from twilight until the evening of the next day. The slaughter is immense. Only 400 young men who were on camels escape. David recovers everything and everyone that had been taken. His 2 wives also, and all that was taken. Nothing was missing, and he brought back all the spoil. 1 Samuel 30 verses 18 to 19. This victory is a turning point for David. It is a tangible demonstration of God's faithfulness and restoration. It is also a stark contrast to Saul's failure. Where Saul spared the good for his own purposes, David recovers all that was lost, restoring his people and his household. However, the aftermath of this battle reveals a new test of David's leadership. The 400 men who went with him refused to share the recovered spoil with the 200 who stayed behind, calling them unclean and insisting they should only get back their wives and children. David's response is a masterclass in unity and grace. He establishes a new principle for Israel's army. For who will hearken unto you in this matter? But as his part is that goeth down to the battle, so shall his part be that tarrieth by the stuff. They shall part alike. 1 Samuel 30 verse 24. He declares that the share of the one who goes to fight and the one who guards the supplies will be the same. This ordinance is made a statute and judgment in Israel from that day forward. It is a profound act of leadership that prevents civil war among his men and solidifies his authority. He is not just a warrior. He is a lawgiver, a unifier, a king in the making. While David's victory at Ziklag was a devastating blow to this particular Amalekite raiding party, it was not the end of the Amalekites as a people. The text notes that 400 men escaped. David's interaction with them was one of retributive justice for a specific act, not the fulfillment of the divine decree to blot their name. The Amalekite threat, though diminished, remained a persistent danger lurking in the southern wilderness, a reminder that the ancient command was still waiting to be fully executed. Finally, we get to the final judgment, the scribe, the king, and the slaughter at Jabesh-Gilead. The long, drawn-out war against Amalek finds its definitive conclusion not in the heat of battle with a warrior king, but through the administrative diligence of a scribe during the reign of a king known for his devotion to the law. The final chapter in the military history of the Amalekites is recorded in the first book of Chronicles, a post-exilic history that often provides details missing from the parallel account in Samuel and Kings. The passage, 1 Chronicles 4 verses 41 to 43, is brief but conclusive, and these written by name came in the days of Hezekiah, king of Judah, and smote their tents and the habitations that were found there, and destroyed them utterly unto this day, and dwelt in their stead, because there was pasture there for their flocks. And some of them, even of the sons of Simeon, went to Mount Seir, even 500 men, and Pelatiah, and Neariah, and Rephaiah, and Uzziel, the sons of Ishi, were their leaders. And they smote the rest of the Amalekites that were escaped, and dwelt there unto this day. This account, likely drawn from royal annals now lost, provides the missing piece of the puzzle. The actors are not the king and his army, but a specific group of men from the tribes of Judah and Simeon. The timing is precise. In the days of Hezekiah, king of Judah. Hezekiah, who reigned in the late 8th century BCE, was a reformer king who did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, according to all that David his father had done. 2 Kings 18 verse 3. He cleansed the temple, destroyed high places, and reinstated the Passover. It was during this period of national religious renewal that the final, lingering remnants of the Amalekites were dealt with. The text describes two separate campaigns. First, men from Judah, during Hezekiah's reign, attack and destroy utterly a group of Amalekites who had settled in a fertile area, taking their land for their own flocks. Then, a second group of 500 Simonites, led by the sons of Ishi, goes to Mount Seir, the traditional Edomite homeland, and smites the rest of the Amalekites that escaped. The phrase, the rest of the Amalekites that were escaped, is the key. It implies that these were the final survivors, the descendants of those who had fled from David, or perhaps even from Saul's earlier campaign. These were the last remnants of the people who had been a thorn in Israel's side for over 600 years. The chronicler, writing from the perspective of the returned exiles, records this event with a sense of finality. They dwelt there unto this day. This is the last we hear of the Amalekites as a distinct national entity in the historical books of the Old Testament. The divine command given at Rephidim, reiterated by Moses and failed by Saul, was finally, and perhaps quietly, fulfilled. It was not the work of a single dramatic act, but of a persistent, generational commitment to God's command. The judgment against Amalek was carried out not by a messianic figure in a single stroke, but by faithful men in a time of national reformation. The long war was over. The name of Amalek, as a people, had been blotted out from under heaven. Yet, the story of Amalek does not end with the disappearance of the Amalekites. The Bible is a book of profound theological connections, and the spirit of Amalek, the archetypal enemy, finds its final and most terrifying incarnation in the person of Haman the Agagite. The setting shifts dramatically from the battlefields of Canaan to the opulent, treacherous courts of the Persian Empire, centuries after the last Amalekite stronghold fell. The Book of Esther, a story where God's name is never mentioned but his providence is felt on every page, serves as the ultimate climax to the 500-year-old saga. The introduction of Haman is loaded with historical and theological weight. He is not just a random antagonist. He is identified as the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, Esther 3 verse 1. The title Agagite is a deliberate and unmistakable link to the Amalekite king Agag, whom Saul spared and whom Samuel subsequently slew. By calling Haman an Agagite, the author of Esther is making a thunderous statement. The spirit of Amalek, the ancient, irreconcilable enemy of Israel, has risen again. The venom that Saul failed to eradicate from the line of Agag has survived, metastasized across centuries and empires, and now stands in a position of immense power, poised to fulfill the ancient ambition of Amalek, the utter destruction of the Jewish people. The conflict begins with the familiar theme of pride and offense. Mordecai, a Jewish exile in the city of Susa, refuses to bow down or pay homage to Haman, who has just been elevated by King Xerxes, to a position above all the other princes. The king's servants question Mordecai's defiance, but he gives no reason, steadfast in his refusal. It is an act of profound courage and conviction, rooted in a Jewish refusal to bow to any mortal man, especially one who embodies a legacy of hostility to God. Haman's reaction is not mere anger. It is a rage that consumes him. When he learns that Mordecai is a Jew, his personal offense morphs into a genocidal hatred. He is not satisfied with punishing one man. He seeks to annihilate his entire people. Having learned who Mordecai's people were, he scorned the idea of laying hands on Mordecai alone. Instead, he sought to destroy all the Jews, the people of Mordecai, throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, Esther 3 verse 6. This is the Amalekite spirit in its purest form, an irrational, all-consuming hatred that seeks not just victory, but total obliteration. Haman proceeds with cunning and malice. He approaches King Ahasuerus and slanders the Jewish people, not with a specific accusation, but with a vague and dangerous characterization. There is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from those of every other people, and they do not keep the king's laws, so that it is not to the king's profit to tolerate them. Esther 3 verse 8. He paints them as an alien, disloyal, and unassimilable element within the empire, a fifth column that threatens the king's stability. He then offers the king a massive bribe, 10,000 talents of silver, to authorize their destruction. The king, swayed by the promise of wealth and the persuasive argument, gives Haman his signet ring, authorizing him to issue an irreversible royal decree. A date is chosen by casting lots, or pur, giving the book its title. Letters are dispatched by swift couriers to every corner of the empire, from India to Kush, ordering the massacre of every Jewish man, woman, and child on a single day, the 13th of Adar, and the plundering of their property. It is the Rephidim scenario writ large, magnified to an imperial scale. Once again, the people of God are vulnerable, facing an enemy who seeks to destroy them utterly. The faint and weary are now an entire diaspora community scattered and defenseless against the machinery of the Persian state. The spirit of Amalek, through Haman the Agagite, has finally marshaled the power to achieve its goal. The book of Esther is a masterclass in dramatic irony. While God's name is absent, his presence is palpable in the intricate coincidences that weave together to save his people. The reversal of fortunes, a central theme in the book, is set in motion by a chain of events that only divine providence could orchestrate. The first link in this chain is Queen Esther herself. A beautiful Jewish orphan, raised by her cousin Mordecai, she has risen to the position of queen through a series of unlikely events. She is in the right place at the right time, uniquely positioned to intercede for her people. When Mordecai learns of the decree, he tears his clothes, puts on sackcloth and ashes, and goes out into the city, wailing loudly and bitterly. He sends a copy of the decree to Esther, urging her to go to the king and plead for her people. Esther's initial response is fear. To approach the king unsummoned is a capital offense, punishable by death unless he extends his golden scepter. She has not been called to him for 30 days. Mordecai's reply to her hesitation is one of the most powerful statements of faith and responsibility in the Bible. Do not think that because you are in the king's house you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this? Esther 4 verses 13 to 14. The drama unfolds with masterful suspense. Esther approaches the king, and he extends his scepter. Instead of blurting out her plea, she invites the king and Haman to a banquet. At the banquet, she again invites them to a second banquet the next day, promising to reveal her request then. Haman leaves the banquet filled with pride and joy, but his elation turns to fury when he sees Mordecai still refusing to bow. He goes home, and at the suggestion of his wife and friends, he has gallows built 75 feet high, on which to hang Mordecai the very next day. That night, the king, unable to sleep, asks for the book of records, the chronicles of his reign, to be read to him. They happen to land on account of how Mordecai had uncovered the plot of 2 of the king's eunuchs to assassinate him, an act for which Mordecai had never been rewarded. What honor or distinction has been bestowed on Mordecai for this? The king asks. His attendants reply, nothing has been done for him. At that very moment, Haman enters the outer court to ask the king's permission to hang Mordecai on the gallows he has just built. The king asks him, what should be done for the man the king delights to honor? Haman, assuming the king means him, outlines a lavish public ceremony. Dress the man in royal robes, place him on a horse the king has ridden, and have a high prince lead him through the city streets, proclaiming, this is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. The king replies, go at once, get the robe and the horse, and do just as you have suggested, for Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. The humiliation is total. Haman is forced to publicly honor the very man he sought to destroy. He rushes home in despair, a broken man, only to be whisked away to Esther's second banquet. There, the king again asks for her request. This time, she reveals her identity and makes her plea. If I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, grant me my life. This is my petition. And spare my people. This is my request. For I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. Esther 7 verses 3 to 4. The king is outraged. Who is he? Where is he? The man who has dared to do such a thing, he demands. Esther points her finger, an adversary and enemy. This vile Haman the Agagite. The king erupts in fury. As he storms out into the palace garden, Haman stays behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. He falls on the couch where Esther is reclining, just as the king returns. The king misinterprets the gesture as an assault on the queen. Will he even molest the queen while she is with me in the house? He roars. The moment the words leave his mouth, a guard covers Haman's face. Harbona, one of the eunuchs, points out the 75-foot gallows Haman had built for Mordecai. The king's order is swift and final. Hang him on it. So they hung Haman on the very gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. The reversal is breathtaking. The plotter is undone by his own plot. The would-be executioner becomes the executed. The fate Haman had meticulously planned for Mordecai is visited upon his own head. It is a moment of poetic justice that resonates with the divine decree against Amalek. But the story is not over. The king's decree to annihilate the Jews, sealed with his own signet ring, is irrevocable by Persian law. Haman's death removes the immediate threat, but does not save the people. Esther again falls at the king's feet, pleading with him to avert the genocidal plan. The king gives Haman's estate to Esther and Mordecai, and he gives Mordecai his signet ring, effectively making him the new prime minister. He then authorizes Esther and Mordecai to write a new decree in the king's name to counteract the first one. The new decree does not cancel the original one. It cannot. Instead, it grants the Jews the right to assemble and defend themselves, to destroy, kill, and annihilate any armed force of any nationality or province that might attack them, along with their women and children, and to plunder their property. It turns the day of intended victimization into a day of sanctioned self-defense. When the 13th of Adar arrives, the Jews gather in their cities throughout the Persian Empire. The text records that no one could stand against them, because the fear of them had fallen on all people. The tables have turned completely. The intended victims become the victors. The Jews strike down all their enemies with the sword, killing and destroying them, and they do as they please to those who hate them. In the citadel of Susa, the Jews kill and destroy 500 men, including the 10 sons of Haman. Mordecai, now a powerful figure in the empire, continues to issue orders, allowing the fighting to continue for a second day in Susa. The book of Esther concludes with the establishment of the Feast of Purim, named after the lot, that Haman had cast to determine the date of the Jews' destruction. It is a joyous celebration of deliverance, a time of feasting and gladness, of sending gifts of food to one another and presents to the poor. The final verses of the book recount Mordecai's rise to greatness, second in rank to King Ahasuerus, and how he worked for the good of his people and spoke up for the welfare of all the Jews. The story of Haman the Agagite is the final, definitive chapter in the biblical history of Amalek. It demonstrates that the enmity was not merely a physical or political one, but a spiritual, generational conflict. The spirit of Amalek, born in the wilderness at Rephidim, nurtured through the line of Agag, and unleashed in the Persian court, sought to achieve what no army could, the total annihilation of the Jewish people. But through the hidden hand of providence, the courage of a queen, and the faith of her people, the plot was turned on its head. The enemy was destroyed, and the people were saved. The war that began with an unprovoked attack on the weak and weary ended with the downfall of the powerful and arrogant. The ancient decree to blot out the remembrance of Amalek was, in a sense, fulfilled not by a single act of conquest, but by God's unwavering commitment to preserve his covenant people, ensuring that the legacy of Amalek would be one of ultimate defeat, not triumph. So, as we look at Scripture, what is the theological legacy of Amalek? I believe he is the archetype of evil. The biblical narrative of Amalek, stretching from the sands of Rephidim to the palaces of Susa, transcends a simple historical account of an ancient enemy. It evolves into a profound theological archetype, a symbol used by the biblical authors to personify a specific kind of evil, the irrational, unprovoked, and perpetual hostility toward God and his people. Amalek becomes the embodiment of the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, not as an internal struggle, but as an external, existential threat. The characteristics that define Amalek's sin at Rephidim, cowardice, preying on the weak, and a defiant lack of fear for God, become the template for understanding this archetype. Amalek represents the force that attacks when God's people are at their lowest, when their faith is wavering and their strength is gone. It is the enemy that needs no provocation, whose hatred is not rooted in grievance, but in a primal opposition to the divine plan. This is why the command to blot out Amalek is so absolute. It is not a call for ethnic cleansing in a modern sense, but a theological imperative to eradicate an idea, a spirit, a force that is fundamentally antithetical to life and holiness. This understanding of Amalek as an archetype finds its most powerful expression in later Jewish thought and rabbinic literature. The rabbis saw Amalek not just as a people, but as a recurring phenomenon. They taught that in every generation, an Amalek rises up to seek the destruction of the Jewish people. This could be a specific individual, like Haman, or a nation, or an ideology. The command to remember Amalek was thus not a call for perpetual bloodshed against a specific tribe, but a call for eternal vigilance against the spirit of Amalek, wherever it might appear. It is a reminder that the struggle against such evil is a defining feature of human experience and of the journey of faith. The story of Amalek also serves as a powerful foil for the nature of God's justice and mercy. The decree of perpetual war seems harsh, but it is presented as a necessary response to an irredeemable evil. Amalek's attack at Rephidim was not a mistake. It was a calculated statement of defiance. By sparing them, Israel would be tolerating a cancer that would continually seek its destruction. The history of Israel's interactions with Amalek proves this point. Every time Amalek was left unchecked, they returned to oppression and attack. The finality of the judgment against them is presented as an act of divine justice, a necessary purging to protect the covenant community and ensure the unfolding of God's redemptive plan, which would ultimately culminate in the coming of the Messiah through the line of Israel. Furthermore, the Amalek narrative highlights the crucial role of human agency in executing divine will. God declares the war, but it is Joshua who must fight in the valley, Moses who must keep his hands raised, Saul who is commanded to strike the blow, and David who must recover his people. Failure of Saul is a central lesson. Partial obedience is disobedience. God's commands are not to be improved upon by human wisdom. To spare the good things, as Saul did, is to fundamentally misunderstand the nature of the divine command and to allow evil to persist. Conversely, the courage of Esther, who risked everything to stand against Haman, is presented as the ideal response. She embodies the faith and action required to confront the Amalekites of one's own generation. In the Christian tradition, Amalek is also often seen typologically. The battle at Rephidim, with Moses' outstretched arms bringing victory, is sometimes interpreted as a prefiguration of Christ on the cross, whose outstretched arms bring victory over sin and death. The command to blot out Amalek can be seen as a symbol of the believer's call to wage war against the flesh, the world, and the devil, the spiritual forces that, like Amalek, seek to destroy the people of God. Ultimately, the legacy of Amalek is a sobering one. It is a reminder that the world contains forces of radical evil that cannot be reasoned with or appeased. It teaches that faith is not passive, but requires active, sometimes difficult, engagement in the struggle for righteousness. And it assures the faithful that even when the enemy seems to have the upper hand, as Haman did, the hidden hand of providence is at work, ensuring that the final word will not belong to Amalek, but to God. The name of Amalek was to be blotted out, but the memory of the evil they represented was to be forever remembered, so that every generation would be equipped to recognize it, resist it, and, through God's grace, overcome it. The 500-year war, from the birth of Amalek to the death of Haman, is thus not just a story of ancient history, but a timeless parable of the perennial conflict between light and darkness, and the ultimate triumph of the covenant of God over all its enemies. This concludes the second video on Amalek and the Amalekites. To watch more videos like this one, you can go to our website at nehemiahreset.org, to our rumble.com or youtube.com channels. We publish new videos weekly. You can also sign up to receive our weekly new video list by going to nehemiahreset.org/email and sign up for our weekly newsletter. To help our channel, please like and subscribe so that more people can see these important videos. Thanks for watching and have a great day. Are you looking for a limitless supply of insightful reads to expand your mind and transform your life. Look no further than Nehemiah Reset's ebook library, where knowledge meets inspiration at nehemiahreset.org ebook. Go there today to discover a wealth of valuable resources to help you on your personal and professional journey to build a biblical worldview. Learn more about the Bible and how culture is impacting your worldview. Again, the ebook library is located at nehemiahreset.org ebook. Hope to see you soon. My name is Daniel. I am one of the spokespersons for Nehemiah Reset. The prior video was sponsored by Nehemiah Reset, a 501c3. Our mission is to assist Christians in developing a biblical worldview as it pertains to relevant cultural and biblical issues. We seek to inform Christ's followers, equip them, and mobilize them in action to vote for their biblical values and actively engage in our We are also committed to help Christians and non-believers to develop a better biblical view. Nehemiah Reset produces videos and ebooks to assist members of the church in developing a biblical worldview when it comes to cultural issues. We produce videos on key topics like public school indoctrination, the woke agenda, sex education, equity and inclusion, climate change, immigration, religious freedom, and much, much more. To learn more about Nehemiah Reset or to watch our latest videos, go to our website at nehemiahreset.org or our rumble.com channel. We produce 2 to 3 videos every week. To get a weekly list of our latest videos, sign up for our weekly newsletter by going to nehemiahreset.org/email and subscribe. You can support our website by liking our videos, subscribing to our channels, or helping us reach more people through tax-exempt donations. Thanks for your help in growing God's kingdom and bringing more people to Christ. Thank you for your support and help. Come back again soon. Have a great day.